I recently spent 48 hours in complete silence with strangers, walking and meditating and practicing yoga. It was one of the weirdest and best things that I have probably ever done. So I'm going to invite you to wrap up warm and come on a chilly little walk with me while I tell you all about it. This is a little more overgrown than the last time I tried to come through here. Having to crouch right down. Oh, actually, I might be stuck. I'm going to go a different way. We're having fun already. Oh no! Hopefully, it hasn't just ripped my jacket. Okay, this is a better route. Let's get into the silent retreat. Why did I want to go on a silent retreat? What was it like? Was it weird? Was it awkward? Did I enjoy it? Did I hate it? Let's start with why. Well, I obviously teach and practice yoga, but if I'm honest, the meditation element is something that I've struggled to be consistent with. I recognise the benefits enormously, but I often fall into the category of people who I think is probably a big category where we wait until we need some help with relaxing, de-stressing, and then when we're in that mindset already of like, God, I'm so frazzled, I'm so exhausted, we then turn to meditation to try and fix it. Whereas I know for a fact that meditation is not supposed to be a cure for when we're feeling frazzled. It is supposed to be a preventative method. So it's something that you need to do regularly. You need to have a consistent form of meditation to really experience the benefits so that you don't get to that point where you're so frazzled and so exhausted that you're looking for a fix. So I went into this really looking for something to give me a bit of a kick up the bum to establish a more regular meditation practice. I started looking around for kind of meditation retreats or meditation training, and then I came across silent retreats, and I found a beautiful place down on the south coast of England near Eastbourne called Gales. What really drew me in was that they do weekend retreats. They do 2 nights. It's not silly money. It just sounded perfect. It was a combination of walking, yoga, and meditation. Cut to a few months later, I was there. I arrived ready to be silent, ready to say nothing to anyone for 2 days. Now, this is where I think this divides people, because for me, as an introvert, that sounds like heaven. But when I've spoken to other people about it, there seem to be 2 camps. Some people are in my camp, think it sounds delightful. Other people are in the camp of, what, you're not allowed to talk to anyone for 2 days? Like that's a real punishment. I would imagine that those 2 camps could probably be described by the labels introvert and extrovert. So for some, I know the idea of being silent for 2 days is unthinkable, unenjoyable. However, there were 1 or 2 of those kind of people on the retreat who were self-proclaimed extroverts who seemed to get a lot out of it. So I don't think it is just for us quiet, introverted people. So we arrived and I was itching to be quiet already. I'd had a long journey down on the train with lots of people around. Stopped in London to see some friends on the way, so I'd been through Victoria Station and it was hectic and loud. And so by the time I arrived at Gales, I was ready to be silent. However, we understandably didn't go straight into the silent part of the retreat. To begin with, there was a bit of time to have a meal together, to talk to one another, to kind of settle in and relax. And then after dinner, we had a little talk about the purpose of the weekend, some kind of ground rules, and then we went into silence from there. I'm going to have to walk very carefully here because look how muddy. We've had a lot of rain recently. So what were the parameters around the silence? What were the rules? I think the thing that people were asking me the most about this afterwards and before I went there was, so you're not allowed to talk? What if you need to say something? And that was very much not the case. It was not a, you will be punished if you talk. It was the understanding within this setting is that we don't need to talk to each other. We're taking away that sort of obligation to make small talk. We're all entering into kind of a social contract for the weekend where we're respecting each other's privacy and each other's quiet time. So even though we're interacting with each other, we went on walks together, we had dinner together, we ate meals together, there was an understanding that we were going to do all those things without needing to talk to one another. And again, as an introvert, that really appealed to me. So Roz, the leader, would be talking where necessary. So, for example, when she was leading yoga or meditation practices, she would talk to us and talk us through it, but with as little language as was necessary. The part that I think we were all probably most nervous about or most apprehensive about was both the walking in silence, so we were going on like 2-3 hour walks, no talking, and the meals, sitting and eating a meal with a group of strangers and not talking to them. What would that feel like? The guidance from Roz on these things was, in terms of meal times, the food would be laid out, we would help ourselves. You could choose to either sit at the table or, because it was towards the end of summer, it was nice and warm, if you wanted to just take your meal, go and sit outside. There were lots of lovely seated areas all around. So you didn't have to sit at the table if it was going to make you feel particularly awkward for not talking to the people around you. And in terms of the walks, she said it will probably challenge how comfortable you are with the silence. So we would walk in single file, one in front of the other, which obviously looked a bit bizarre to passers-by, but it meant that you didn't feel like you had to talk to the person next to you because there was no person next to you. There was a person in front of you and a person behind you. And actually that worked really well. But the difficulty was passers-by, if you're all on a walk, of course people, when they walk past you, go, "Morning, hello," and you so desperately want to say it back. So Roz, her advice was, if you really cannot stand the idea of not saying it back to them, just say hello. It's not a big deal. But a smile does just as much. A polite smile, a little nod. You don't necessarily have to say anything. I think the common thread between a lot of us who were on the retreat was people pleasers. It's kind of exhausting, or it can be, to feel the need, the pressure to smile and speak to everybody when you don't always feel like it. Obviously, we weren't going to be rude to any passers-by, but smiling and nodding was enough. We didn't need to say hello, we didn't need to do small talk. So I was quite nervous about going on the walks because I thought that might be uncomfortable. It was actually fine. Nobody cared. I'm getting pretty warm now. I'm going to have to unzip. Ooh. This is so lovely. I'm glad you're joining me on the walk. Once we had all the kind of rules and boundaries and things put in place, and we knew that if we needed to ask Roz a question, we could. If we needed to talk, we could. No one was going to tell us off. We then entered into silence together. And for me, it felt really quite freeing to just be in comfortable silence with people. That evening, we went to bed. It was shared dorms, although you could get private rooms if you wanted to. And I also worried that part might be awkward, sharing a room with, for me, it was 3 other people who I didn't know, and not talking to them, not saying goodnight, or do you mind if I turn the light off, or, you know, all of those kind of things. We just coexisted harmoniously, and it was lovely. There was no awkwardness at all, actually. If anything, it possibly took away awkwardness because we knew we didn't have to talk. We knew there was no need to. There was no need to say anything. I'm going to have a little sit. The only time that I really wanted to say something when we were in the dorms was the very first night. So it was a really big space. There were 8 beds dotted around the room, but there were only 4 of us staying in there, so they only put bedding on 4 beds. I had set all my stuff up when I first arrived. I'd picked my bed in the corner, and then that evening, brushed my teeth, got ready for bed, pyjamas on, and as I was about to get into bed, I looked up at the ceiling, and there was the most enormous spider right above my bed. So I thought about it for a little while and decided there was no way I was going to be able to relax and sleep knowing that huge spider was right above me. So I decided to switch beds. I got all the bedding off, got all my stuff, and moved it over to the other side of the room to a different bed. And I suppose it's that almost people-pleasing kind of mentality. I was thinking, they're all going to be so confused about what I'm doing. Why am I doing that? I really want to explain it to them and tell them there's a spider. And then I had to sort of sit with it and go, well, actually, they probably don't really care. They're probably not that interested about why I'm moving. It doesn't really matter. If they're really curious, they'll ask me. And little moments like that just started change my mindset a little bit around, why do I need to say this thing to this person, or can I just let it go, just do what I want to do as long as it's not affecting anybody else? So little moments like that were interesting to navigate. We had a lot of free time as well between activities, and although we were allowed to have, books and journals and write and read and do whatever we wanted to do within reason, there was no TVs, and we were encouraged to put phones and things away for the weekend. Although we had access to books and everything else, we were encouraged to take time to just be, to not fill every moment with an activity. And so I did. I had a lot of time where I just sat. They had hammocks, they had lovely seated areas all around the venue, and I spent probably a couple of hours one day just sitting in this hammock or laying in the hammock, looking up at a tree, watching birds go by, and just existing within my own thoughts. And it was really lovely. I think that I was maybe a little bit scared of doing that. I wonder if you can relate to this idea of getting too warm now, being kind of afraid of just being with your own thoughts. And I hear people talk about this in yoga classes quite often. Sometimes people will avoid coming to the slower paced yoga classes or yin yoga because, and they will tell me this, that they don't feel totally comfortable just lying and relaxing. They need to be doing something, otherwise they're afraid or uncomfortable with just being with their own brain for that amount of time. I felt incredibly grateful, and I really felt the privilege of being able to sit with my own thoughts for a couple of days, and for most of what I was feeling and experiencing to be gratitude, positivity. And I hope that saying this is not making any of you want to throw up out of, God, she had such a lovely weekend, we get it. I suppose I'm just saying that I recognise that I am in a privileged position, number one, to be able to go on a weekend like this financially and to have the free time to be able to do it, but also to be healthy enough physically and mentally to be able to enjoy and really get a wonderful experience out of a retreat like this. I recognise that privilege and I'm very, very grateful for it. Anyway, I've gone a little off track, but hopefully you're still with me. Let's keep walking. So how much meditation was there? We often think of meditation as traditional, seated, cross-legged, quiet meditation, and we did do some of that. We did half-hour stints of sitting in silence together, no music, no distractions, just sitting. But really everything we were doing over the weekend was a form of meditation. The walking, even eating meals, practicing yoga, everything was without distraction. There were no screens, no phones. It was slow and unrushed. Everything was conscious, mindful, deliberate. So it really did feel like being in a kind of present and meditative state for 48 hours. And that was really the gift of the weekend, the gift that kept giving, because it's quite rare, certainly for me, and maybe you'll agree, it's quite rare that we actually spend any real amount of time being totally present, totally connected to what we're doing. We tend to reach for our phones, scroll, reply to messages as soon as they come in because we feel we need to. Maybe we put the TV or the radio on in the background so that it's not too quiet in the house while we're doing other jobs. Even when we go out for a walk, we might put headphones in and listen to music or a podcast. It's pretty rare that we spend time quietly, without distraction, with our own thoughts. And so that was my big takeaway from the weekend, was not necessarily that I needed to do more seated, lotus pose, legs crossed meditation, although I have done a little bit more of that since, but more so that there is so much value in spending time without distraction, just being. So what was the outcome after the retreat? When I got home, did I start meditating every day? Did I throw away my phone, get rid of my TV? Did I do all of that stuff? Well, let's get home first. I'll make a cup of tea and I'll tell you my final thoughts on the silent retreat. I always find it so funny watching vlogs and videos where people walk past the camera like that, because they have to walk back to the camera to pick it up, to keep going. You can't believe anything. Final thoughts. Would I recommend going on a silent retreat, and how have I implemented more meditation into my life since? First of all, I would massively recommend this retreat specifically at Gales. If you're looking for something like this, whether you have done a lot of meditation and yoga before or whether you are quite new to both, as long as you're comfortable with long walks, I think this would be brilliant for anyone, regardless of level. By the way, the food was phenomenal. Roz's husband does most of the cooking. They have a big vegetable patch allotment on site where most of the food is grown. It was phenomenal food. It was really delicious. So everything included, I think I paid $350 for the weekend. So 2 nights from Friday afternoon to Sunday afternoon. Just to give you an idea on cost. I feel like I'm very lucky that I was in a position where I could afford it in both senses, financially and in terms of having the time to go and do there and the freedom. A final thing, have I managed to keep up a regular meditation practice since I got home? Yes and no. I have not sat in meditation every day, and that was, I think if I'm honest, when I was going into it, that was almost one of my goals, was to come away from it feeling motivated to do a seated meditation practice daily. I haven't done that. I have certainly done more meditation in that format, but what I quickly realised on the retreat was that all of what I've just talked about, being quiet, away from screens, away from phones, being present and connected to what you're doing, whether that's walking, reading, just sitting and, staring into space for a little while, which I think is a very valuable use of time occasionally. All of these things are a form of meditation, or they can be if you bring a conscious mindset to them. So I have definitely been doing more of that since I got home. And for that, I'm very grateful to Roz, to Gales, and to my wonderful experience in silence. What do you think, Penny? Could you be silent for 48 hours? She's a natural. Let me know in the comments if this is something that you would be interested in trying, or maybe it's something you have tried before. Ask any questions you have. If there's anything I've forgotten to mention, put it in the comments below and I'll get back to you. And I hope to see you in another video very soon. Bye bye.